What's up, everybody? And today we're checking out a video that was highly requested. Last week I did the Garand Thumb SA80 or the L85 video, and everyone was messaging me being like, "You've got to check out Forgotten Weapons. Check out their channel. They've done a great breakdown of the L85A1, the SA80." It's an older video coming out in 2016. It is the A1 that they're talking about, so the variant that is dreadful. It's titled Enfield L85A1, perhaps the worst modern military rifle, which I can't not agree with that with the A1 version. I will definitely, as I always do, leave a link down in the description. If you want to go and watch the video without me waffling over the top of it, you can certainly go and do that in the description below. I encourage that you go over there and support these channels watching these videos. It's a 16.5-minute video. I'm presuming it's a bit more in-depth from what people have been telling me. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting. Obviously, this is the weapon that I was highly trained on in the Royal Marines Commandos, and it's super interesting getting other people's perspectives. I'm presuming this guy is American. I'm presuming. I haven't watched his videos. Let me just listen real quick. I'll put it in the middle and just...
Not a lot of sympathy there.
Yeah, it's American, so it is super interesting listening to American opinions on the SA80, because I remember being in training and a lot of people having a lot of gripes with it and just not hating on it, because by the time I was in the military, we were on the A2 variant. The SA80 was slowly getting rid of the SUSAT and was going to the ACOG. We was getting Picatinny rails. That front plastic guard was being changed. There was lots of little changes happening to it. It did make it a little bit of a better rifle. I still really like it. I love magazines at the back. I prefer the way that it feels more compact and it makes the barrel shorter. So yeah, I mean, we'll get into all that with the video. I don't think there's anything else I need to announce as far as I'm aware. In the description, you will see links to all my recording gear. I'm thinking of next week starting a live stream a week. I really miss playing video games with you guys. And I don't want to go crazy. Like, before I took the long break, I started playing all sorts of different games. But I kind of want to just stick to military stuff. I'm really, like, feeling it these days, which is really, really good. So I want to kind of get back to basics and play some military games. So if you've got some recommendations, let me know in the description in the comments down below. But other than that, let's shut up. Let's pull this up. ForgottenWeapons.com. Let's see what he's got to say about the L85. I'm going to put subbies on. Let's have a look. And this is the A1 variant. A1 variant.
Can you hear that? I can hear it. That's the sound of every former British service member cringing at the mere sight of this rifle. And it's so loud you can hear it over the internet. Thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm here today at the Institute of Military.
It's so weird just seeing the rifle. Because it's been, you got to remember, I left the Commandos in 2012. A long time ago. You're talking 12 years ago I left. You know, 16 years ago was when I joined in 2008, sorry. And so, like, it's just a bizarre, almost like nostalgic kind of feel when I see it. It's really strange.
Technology. Taking a look at this L85A1 British bullpup rifle. Now, this is probably more so than any other firearm in current service, a giant scandal of plastic and metal.
I do have to say, though, and I think it's only fair to say, it looks really cool. Like, as appeal of looks go, it is a pretty cool-looking rifle. You could disagree with that, but I think it does look cool.
We'll start with a little bit of the history of this rifle, and then we'll go into why it became such a hot potato.
See, I'm more interested in this, the history of it.
These were originally developed in the 1970s, and the British government knew that it would need to replace the FAL, the L1A1, with a new small...
The FAL was actually a really... I mean, I say really loved it. I remember my dad telling me that he really liked that rifle when he was in the Navy. He was in the Royal Navy during the Falklands War and all that lot, and he liked that rifle, the FAL. So...
rifle. And they were looking at a whole bunch of different options. They considered everything from 4mm up to 7mm. And the early versions of this rifle were actually developed in a proprietary 4.85mm cartridge. And one of these days, I'll get my hands on some of those prototypes and we'll bring them here to show you. But
this definitely seems like a really toned down, more informational style of video. Garand Thumb is definitely like a more of a hands-on shooting the rifle and being a bit more, mechanics of it, actually showing you the mechanics. Whereas this seems like a very much a slowed down, here's the information about it more than anything. And I feel like that's a good contrast to have between the two videos. So thank you to everyone who recommended it.
As it turned out, of course, NATO decided to adopt the 5.56 round developed in the US, and so that became the obvious de facto cartridge to use. So the rifle was redeveloped or tweaked to accommodate the 5.56 NATO cartridge, and it was then adopted. The development process really was in the late 1970s, ultimately adopted in 1985 as the L85A1, and there was also a companion rifle, or a companion light machine gun, the L86A1, which was intended to be a squad automatic weapon. It's basically the same gun, but with a longer barrel. And in theory, it was...
And it was dreadful. It was, oh my God, it was the worst.
To provide more sustained fire. Had a bipod.
It was dreadful.
Now, the British went with a bullpup here, and a lot of people are going to say, they just took the bullpup they had right after World War II and used it. Actually, they didn't. The EM1 and the EM2 bullpups, the EM2 having actually...
I've never seen these before. Well, I've seen them, but no, I haven't seen these before. I especially haven't seen the EM2. Have I seen these before? I've never seen that. Whoa, that's weird. This is post-World War II? I feel like I've seen the EM1, maybe. The EM2 I've never seen. I can see why a lot of people thought that it was just a rendition, like an evolution from the SA-80. It was the de-evolution of the SA-80, and maybe this was what inspired it. Especially because you've got that like hand grip scope. Obviously, it's a bullpup. Magazine's at the back. And almost with that E2... My head's in the way. Let me just move my head up a bit. The EM2 almost looks like they just swapped out the wood for the plastic in a way for the SA-80. Doesn't it? Interesting.
Been adopted as rifle number 9 by the British just after World War II, and then very quickly unadopted, which is a story all its own.
Yeah, that's weird.
That rifle shares nothing with the L85 except the basic bullpup concept. If anything, the EM2 was basically a 308 bullpup G43. This is basically a bullpup AR-180, and we'll pull it apart in a minute. Now, after these were adopted, they went...
I'm excited for them to pull it apart because I've not actually seen the inside of these in a very long time.
Into production at RSAF, Royal Small Arms Factory, Enfield. These were actually the last gun to be developed and produced at Enfield, and unfortunately the quality control was pretty spotty. Now, production did eventually move to a new facility at RSAF Nottingham, and apparently the QC was a little bit better there. They had a lot of new machinery that they were using for production, but by that point the damage was done. This rifle was not a reliable gun in pretty much any circumstances. It had problems, and these were kind of they managed to kind of bury these and overlook them, and it wasn't that big of a problem for the government anyway, not necessarily for the guys who had to carry them. It wasn't that big of a problem until Desert Storm, and the British had a substantial combat contingent in the initial invasion of Iraq, and the guns really performed poorly in the sand. And there was
just like Anakin doesn't love that sand.
A report that was written detailing all of these problems and submitted to MOD in the aftermath of Desert Storm, and it got leaked to the public. And this document basically said these guns are a piece of junk and they never work, and you got to do something to fix it. And of course, when this leaked to the public, it was a huge scandal. Well, the MOD Ministry of Defense, didn't make things better by initially completely denying all charges. Everything. It's all fake. Can't trust any of it.
Classic. So you got to remember as well, they must have figured out some aspects, because I was training doing pre-deployment with this thing, and they took it out to Afghan. I didn't take it out to Afghan. Obviously, I did anti-piracy. We were on ship with it. Like, it's been all over the world, this rifle. So when they upgraded to the A2, they must have had some small benefits that changed it.
But it wasn't fake, and it stayed in the news. And then finally, they came back and went, well, okay, maybe it's not fake, but it's certainly not official, which it was. And that didn't take either. And a little while after that, they had to come back and say, well, okay, it's not unofficial, but it's only like semi-official, which it wasn't really either. They just kept stonewalling this problem. And finally, in 1997, they couldn't stonewall it any longer, and they had to do something, and they actually hired H&K to basically redesign and rebuild the rifles. Now, there was, of course, consideration for just scrapping them entirely at that point and
They should
adopting a
have.
new rifle.
I know that the A2 and the A3 variant were relatively decent, but I think they should have just scrapped them. Now they're replacing all the rifles in the UK, and I feel like it's taking it's becoming way more expensive than it needs to be. Where if they did it back then, it wouldn't have been as bad. So yeah, they should have really just switched it up, followed the Americans, to be honest, and not gone for bullpup. Even though I do personally like that preference, but I think that's mostly just from the fact that I trained with it. Like, I think that's only, natural for me to prefer a weapon like that because I've literally, like, I know it like the back of my hand. You know what I mean?
Presumably the M16. That was turned down basically because of cost. They figured it would be substantially cheaper to fix the existing
that didn't work
guns
out in the
than to
long
just
run, did
buy
it?
entirely new guns. And there were some things that they had specifically wanted with this bullpup style. Primarily, they wanted to replace the Sterling submachine gun and the FAL rifle with a single weapon system.
Oh.
This is part of the same rationale that the French used when they adopted the FAMAS. The idea being, if you have your combat rifle this short, by making it a bullpup, you can effectively substitute it for the submachine gun, which, a normal submachine.
You have to admit it is a pretty compact weapon. When you look at the length of the new US, let me get up the length real quick. I keep forgetting the name of the new US Army rifle. What is it again? It's the XM7, the Sig Sauer. XM7. Just getting up the length of it real quick. 36 inches. $30 inches. So you're looking at 6 extra inches for the newer rifle. Like, it is a relatively smaller, compact rifle, which is pretty good, in my opinion, especially for the usage of going through CQB and all that lot. But like 6 inches is a lot. 6 inches is big, guys. It's a lot. It's a lot extra rifle right there.
Machine gun is gonna be about the same overall length when you're using it because it's not a bullpup design. Whether that works in practical reality is another issue.
Right.
That was part of the reason they wanted a bullpup. So they decided to stick with the L85s. Now, a lot of people joke about the fact that the British had to hire the Germans to fix the gun. Well, it's worth noting that at the time that this happened, HK was actually a subsidiary owned by a British company, Royal Ordnance. So while, yes, HK is a German company, they weren't actually German owned at the time. They were actually British owned, which gives that choice a little more, makes more sense with that.
I do like this guy's... He's obviously done a lot of research with this weapon, and it's almost as if he's trying, and there's always going to be natural bias in there. He's trying to be as unbiased as he possibly can with that, and I really, really respect it. I really respect it because there are some things about this rifle that are decent. It is a dreadful rifle. I'm telling you that right now. It is absolutely dreadful and should not have been adopted by the British military. But it doesn't mean that every single thing about it is bad. Do you know what I mean?
So the Germans at HK went through the rifle and they came up with just a couple things to fix, namely everything. In the rebuild, they either replaced or redesigned the bolt, the gas piston, the gas block.
It was pretty much everything on the inside.
The front trunnion, the hammer, all of the springs, pretty much all of the pins, the magazine release, and the furniture, and the charging handle. And probably a couple other things.
The handle definitely had to be changed.
They basically kept the receivers as a shell and replaced everything else inside them. And from 2000 to 2002, they rebuilt about 200,000 of these rifles into what became known as the L85A2 configuration for the cost of about 92 million pounds.
Woo!
And what's good, the problem here is because these guns had so many reliability problems to begin with, they will probably never overcome that reputation.
Yeah.
They had far more problems than the M16 did in Vietnam, and yet still to this day, we hear about the M16 being an unreliable piece of junk because of some limited issues that were actually pretty easily fixed in the early days of Vietnam. Well, the L85 had much more substantial and severe problems to begin with.
Yeah.
And even though the A2 appears to be a pretty darn good gun now, its reputation is dead forever
Yeah.
because of how bad the A1 was.
Yeah, and he's being honest there. Like they did make some really good changes. And the A2 is a really decent rifle. I've shot it countless times. I actually don't know how many times I've shot it. It's been that many, and it is a relatively decent gun. It's good accuracy. It's decent in CQB. It's easy to clean and strip. Well, actually, I take back the clean part. Sometimes cleaning it's an absolute nightmare. But once you get good at it, do you know what I mean? But the A1 is dreadful, and that reputation was going to follow it inevitably.
So we'll take a look at some of the external differences here between this, which is an A1, and the A2. But first, a couple other things to consider. Reasons why the British didn't necessarily like this rifle, the British soldiers. It is a bullpup. It makes no accommodation for left-handed shooting.
Yep.
Most bullpups, like the Steyr AUG, the French FAB.
I remember being in training when we first got our hands on the weapons, because we did a crazy amount of dry drills with this thing before we even got on the range. And I remember someone saying something about being, oh no, if I remember correctly, one of the training team was like, all right, who's left-handed? And a couple people put their hand up as if there was going to be some sort of accommodation for it. And they were like, okay, it doesn't matter.
Moss, the military ones, they can be switched to left-handed operation. The L85 cannot. It's right-handed, and if you are a lefty, tough cookies, you'll learn how to shoot as a righty. So not a huge, not a lot of sympathy there. The scope that is on these is a 4-power scope. It's called the SUSAT, which is, I believe,
dreadful.
Sighting Unit Small Arms Trilux.
Holy, I've not heard someone say that full name in years. That's like one of the memories that's in the back of your mind that's just disappeared forever. Them little cells in your brain haven't fired up in a long, long time. When someone just mentions it, you get like a million flashbacks of someone saying that. Sighting Unit Small Arms Trilux. Wow. God, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Really heavy scope.
Yeah, it's dreadful.
Like a 2-pound scope and base. All of the windage and elevation adjustments are done externally. So it's a very rugged scope. You could probably, drive a tank over this thing and it would survive.
No, you couldn't.
But with the scope and with a loaded magazine, this rifle is almost the exact same weight as an FAL.
The SUSAT, the issue I had with the SUSAT is it's incredibly clunky. Like, it's really, really clunky. And I specifically remember it's almost as if, like, when we got the ACOG, do you know, have you ever gone from like a 720 to a 4K TV? And I know that doesn't really count, but just the visuals on the inside was just dog shit, absolute dog shit. The reticle, the dot on the inside is like giant, and it just looks like shit. It looks like dog shit. People always used to put when you'd mess with your mates, this rubber eyepiece here, you'd put a bit of boot polish on it. When someone go put it on the eye, they'd have a black ring on their eye.
You would think part of the idea of going to a lighter caliber rifle would be to have a lighter rifle.
Yeah.
They didn't. It's basically like carrying a FAL, except all the weight's in the back. So on full auto, it tends to bounce around more than a non-bullpup 5.56.
That's true, but you can also, because the weight's on the back, you can really get it in tight, which is really nice. And it means that the rifle isn't super long, so you do have a little bit of good control on it. But I get what he means with it being light on the front. It's a bit wobbly up front. But if you're in a good fire position, if you're laid down or if you're resting your arm on something, it's not an issue. Especially if you're a good shooter.
On these guns, which I can show you here.
I hate the mag release on them.
Magazine release is completely unprotected, and because you have to shoot this right-handed, you're carrying.
It says unprotected. There's a bit of a guard on the A2 around it. I just remember it just getting clogged up full of shit all the time. You can't really, unless you've got the tools for it, you can't really take it all apart and clean on the inside. It's a nightmare.
Like this, which means the mag release is between the gun and your body.
Yeah.
Which makes it pretty easy to bump it on web gear or anything you happen to be carrying. And one of the regular complaints about the rifle was that it was way too easy to accidentally hit the mag release, drop your mag without realizing it.
I do want to preface this by saying I did train and use the A2. I only saw the A1 a couple of times and kind of had a fiddle about it, but I didn't actually get to shoot the A1. Sorry, the A1 I didn't really... Did I mix that up then? I used and shot the A2. That's what I used a lot. And the A1, I only saw it a couple of times and kind of fiddled with it, but I didn't really like shoot it or anything like that. I remember being in the storeroom when I was injured in training, and one of them was like, "Oh, these are the parts for the A1," and was showing me all the stuff. Yeah. So that was my extent with the A1. I remember this. I remember specifically looking at the cocking handle and being a bit like, "The fuck."
And then when you need the rifle, you have one round in the chamber, and that's it. Not a good thing to have happen. So I think that pretty much covers the external stuff. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at this, and I'll show you a couple of the other changes, and then we'll take it apart.
Yeah.
All right, so one of the most distinctive differences between the A1 and the A2 is the charging handle here. When HK redesigned the gun, they replaced this with a plastic charging handle that's kind of comma-shaped. And the reason was when it's fully cycled backwards, it acts as a shell deflector.
Yeah.
That was one of the whole litany of problems with the rifle is the ejection pattern.
Yeah, but it's not just plastic, though. It's got like a little bit of a metal plate on that part where the shell actually hits it. So it's not like it's going to hit the plastic and just melt the plastic.
Changed radically as the gun heated and cooled. So they fixed part of that by having a deflector to kick the shells into a predictable pattern. Now, other controls here on the side. We do have a manual hold open here. We have a dust cover, which pops open when I charge the bolt. If I pull the bolt all the way back and then, push this down, I can lock the bolt open.
So much oil. So much oil
here.
Oh, I guess this does have the guard around it here. I remember this clip being pretty stiff, even though you'd clean it a lot. It was a pretty stiff clip, or the spring in it was pretty stiff, and so knocking it and having your magazine fall out wasn't ever an issue I had personally. So I can understand why that would be a complaint if the A1 had a really soft spring in there and it was really loose. I can definitely see that, but for me with the A2, it definitely didn't.
This little button, which acts as a bolt release, so if I push that, I believe it's up, down.
Oh, it's down.
Push that down, drops the bolt. We also, in an interesting choice, we have the selector lever back here on the bottom of the receiver.
I do want to say, so it is an interesting choice because a lot of the US weapon, if I can remember, the change of shots with the safety, I'm pretty sure, right? You got like safety on, single fire, automatic. Am I correct by saying that? Someone said that in a video recently. Whereas with us, we very rarely go to auto. In fact, we never really do. I remember doing it maybe once or twice in training. Like, it's always single shot, always, for accuracy purposes.
Or R for semi-auto, and A for fully auto.
Yeah, we never did that.
That's kind of a stiff thing. You kind of are going to end up picking a mode and leaving it there for that. Now here's that unprotected mag catch that I mentioned. It really does kind of stick out, and it really is pretty easy to accidentally drop a magazine.
Yeah, I feel like I never had an issue with that, though, personally. I mean, I don't know, maybe the spring in my rifle was always pretty stiff. I never had an issue with that as far as I'm aware.
So the A2s have a bit of a shield around that mag catch to make that less likely.
I mean, it's not much of a shield. Let me just go back so you can see it a little bit. It's just that this part here is a little bit higher, I'm pretty sure. So it's not like you can brush your finger across this way and hit it. It was also a nightmare to clean because of that. But it was pretty much the same as that. It wasn't much different.
Trigger up here, of course, and then this is our crossbolt safety. So this is currently on fire. If I push that in, now it's on safe.
Yeah.
Flip it over, safe to fire. Now, because this is a right-handed only gun, that's a reasonably ergonomic control, although I think troopers often wanted to be able to use this thumb to do it instead.
Yeah, you never could.
Now, taking the
unless you
rifle
really
apart is
move your
fairly
thumb
simple.
over.
We'll start by pulling the magazine out. And then there are two main cross pins.
God, I've not seen one of these get deassembled. Well, it's going to be different because it's the A1, but I've not seen one being taken apart in so long. It's going to be weird seeing... Like, literally, the last time I saw an SAA to get taken apart was in the Marines 12 years ago, so this is going to be really weird for me.
These two, that I need to push out.
They were a nightmare to click. Yeah.
That one needs a little persuasion.
Yeah, they were hard to click open.
Second pin right there. That one I can get with my thumb. Flip that over. These are both captive pins, which is nice. Pull them out.
Has he
Then the
cocked the
lower
weapon?
assembly
Oh, maybe it doesn't matter with this.
pivots off the gun.
If you don't and you do that, the spring pops out the back, so you got to be careful.
I should point out here something I keep meaning to mention and keep forgetting. One of the other problems with the A1s was that the furniture actually broke a lot, especially in cold weather, but even in warm weather. This stuff was not high quality and would break.
Interesting.
So we have our trigger mechanism here. With the
Oh, I can just remember like trying to get my finger in here to clean it when they were doing inspection, and wow, I've not seen the inside of one of these in a long time.
Actual bits back there. You can see this long trigger connecting bar.
Yep.
Right there to connect the trigger back to the actual sear.
Yep.
Then the upper receiver is basically a copy of the AR-180. So we have a pair of dual guide rods, and the bolt actually runs on steel guide rods. It doesn't actually run on the receiver itself, which is a good idea. That was part of the basis of the AR-180 design, is you could make a pretty cheap bent steel upper receiver, and you didn't have to worry really about wear on it because you'd have the bolt running on these guide rods instead. Now, on the AR-180, each of the guide rods has a recoil spring. The SA-80, or the L85 here. By the way, SA-80 means Small Arms 1980, and it's the name for the family of this and the L86.
Yeah, we always just call it the SA-80 for obvious reasons. I guess it's just what we adopted as its name.
These have a single recoil spring in the center here as opposed to a pair of them. And this guide rod and recoil spring assembly is held in place by this rear cross pin.
Yeah, so if he pulls it out a bit more, it'll ping out.
So that pin is currently pulled back far enough to release the lower, but keep the springs in place. I hold on to it and then pull.
Got to click.
That
there you
pin
go.
The rest of the way out.
There you
now,
go.
We can release the guide rod.
Yep, cleaning them things was just my life for 32 weeks of training. Was cleaning this thing right here.
Once the guide rods are out, then the bolt can come out. I'm going to pull the bolt handle back to this circular cutout.
Yeah.
The handle comes out.
It's interesting to see that bolt. And I'm interested to see the difference between this and the A2.
Disassembly of the bolt itself is very much like the AR.
Doesn't seem that much different to the A2, to be honest with you.
180, again, we have basically to get the bolt out, you have to take the
small pin out there.
Cam pin out. To take the cam pin out,
This
you have
pin.
to take the firing pin out, and to take the firing pin out, you have to take the firing pin retaining pin out.
Yeah.
So we'll start with that retaining pin. You would normally do this with the tip of a cartridge. I just have a punch instead. So that pin comes out. Then
I remember a
the
lad
firing
losing
pin comes out the back.
one of them pins. Oh, the firing pin's a little bit
Then
different.
I can pull the cam pin here.
So there is a few differences there.
There's that. You can
That's
see the
the
little hole there.
same.
The cam pin is held in place by the firing pin, like
Yeah.
that.
Is it a little bit different?
Now,
Yeah, it looks different.
Bolt comes out. This is a multi-lug rotating bolt,
Yeah.
just like an AR-15 bolt, except machined slightly differently. And there is our AR-180 style bolt body.
Is he going to put the A2 next to it? I'd love for him to do that.
Not a particularly complex bolt. About the same as an AR-15 in terms of complexity and the number of parts that you've got lying around when you're done.
Yeah, cleaning this thing was the bane of my existence. I'm telling you that right now.
Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. L85s are quite hard to come by here in the United States because they were never available as a commercial option. There was some talk about bringing in some semi-automatic ones, which was quashed by the 1989 U.S. assault weapons import ban. So there aren't any here. The British attempted to make export sales of these, but for obvious reasons, didn't make very many.
Yeah.
So it's very cool to be able to take a look at this one at the IMT.
The IMT, Institute of Military
Pull it
Technology.
apart for you and show you how it works. So if you're interested in doing more small arms research here, do definitely get in touch with them and make an appointment. They're not generally open to the public, but they are available by appointment. If you like seeing this sort of thing online, where you don't have to travel anywhere, well, I would appreciate it if you might consider checking out my Patreon page. It is the subscribers there who make it possible for me to travel to these places, find these guns, and bring them to you.
Yeah, so definitely go over. There will be a link in the description if you want to go watch the video without me talking over the top of it. My experience with the SA80A2 was relatively okay. It wasn't amazing. I much preferred it when I got the marksman rifle, the L29. I really liked that rifle. I thought it was brilliant, and I'm really glad that they're adopting a new rifle right now. I keep forgetting the name of the new rifle as well, but it looks really, really cool, and I'm kind of jealous in a way that they've got a new rifle over there in the Royal Marines now. Pretty jealous. The SA80, it's nostalgic for me. I'll always love it for that purpose. You know, if it's in a video game, even if it's terrible, I'll end up picking it just for the sake of nostalgic reasons, you know? But overall, it would be so bizarre for me to get my hands on one now and actually try it out because it's been so long. I feel like no matter what military you're in, the rifle you have in training in military is the one that you'll always have a soft spot for. And I'm sure there's so many veterans who watch these videos. I'm sure you can all agree with that. I overall think it was a terrible decision to put it into the military, but it's something that I do have a soft spot for. So let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Don't forget, if you want to go and watch the video without me waffling over the top, you can certainly go and do that down in the description below. I'm trying out this new thing where I'm only doing one video a week, but I'm making them a little bit longer. Let me know what you think about that as well. Other than that, I love you all. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.